Good morning. Welcome to Module 5, Mining Fiscal Frameworks and Taxation. We are going to start and look at how governments must actually put policies that are fair for taxation of mining companies and also to the benefit of the communities and the country at large. Minerals and extractive industry is very capital intensive, meaning that they have very huge budgets for both exploration and also for mining. In the exploration phase of minerals, the money is spent and there's no guarantee that they are going to find something. Banks never fund exploration, and this money, as we discussed before, comes from the stock market. And the stock market is the one that advances money to exploration and mining companies to look for minerals. Okay, now when mining starts and a company begins to produce metals from the ground and they start selling, they start making money. And those are what we call fiscal revenues. These fiscal revenues are the money that are coming directly from mining. So the commodity prices, when they are at their highest, the companies would make the most profits. However, there are times when the metal prices are down, and then there are times when metal prices are high, because it's a cyclic process. And so government need to take into account this cyclic process for metallic prices being high or low. And they need to have policies that address each cycle, the low cycle and the high cycle, because this is how mining generates revenue. So a fiscal framework must be put in place that accounts for the high and the low. Okay. So how would governments make money from these companies? Mostly is through taxes and royalties. Okay, we discussed royalties. So the first is known as corporate tax. The corporate tax is based on the amount of profit the company has made in that particular year. If the company has not made a profit, they will not be charged corporate tax. They're just going to be charged royalties. For royalties, you pay whether or not you make a profit. Then there's another tax which some countries use, other countries don't use it, which is known as ad valorem tax. This is based on the amount of ore or the metal which is still underground, which is still not processed, which is still not mined. So these are resources in the ground. The royalties is based on the amount you have sold or shipped, regardless of whether a profit was made or not. So most governments prefer to use royalties for one major reason. Companies can hide their profits through transfer pricing or mispricing, or they can hide it in other forms of development and production costs, but they cannot hide what they sell. So the governments always prefer to have royalties together with corporate tax. Okay. Revenues from mining can be significant, and when they are significant, particularly oil and gas, they can account for a large proportion of fiscal revenues in the country. For example, in 2011, during the peak of the mineral prices, mining accounted for 34% of total fiscal revenues in Botswana, 25% in Guinea and Zambia, and 24% in Mongolia, and 17% in Chile. This is a large chunk of money. Therefore, these industries, extractive industries, they give impetus to other economic sectors like infrastructure, construction, service sectors like transportation, which further magnify the impact of mining on the economy of the country and also the fiscal revenues coming. Mining leads to the creation of jobs in these service sectors such as transport, supply of materials, education and health, since miners would need to have schools and clinics and so forth. So these fiscal revenues have got an impact, and this impact is normally felt by the local people who are actually involved in mining and the country that is involved in mining. And getting taxes from these companies. In most mineral resource-rich countries, they get up to 25% to 50% of the income from mining. For example, countries like Zambia, countries like Angola, countries like Nigeria, okay, and Ghana. This puts these nations on a non-stable budgetary framework because metal prices are very volatile. They go up and they go down. This leads to these countries to borrow either from domestic market or internationally to fulfill their budgetary requirements. And this process is what leads these countries into debt. They get into debt. This external debt can be quite large. Now, our main topic today is to try and find out how governments can translate these revenues from minerals into sustainable development. How can we produce sustainable development? Sustainable development can be found if we can translate fiscal revenues into benefits, and these benefits are put here into 4 steps. The first one is mining companies can need to earn profits, and then they can be taxed from these profits. The second one is government need to collect fiscal revenues from mining companies. And the third one, governments need to manage these revenues. And the fourth one, government need to spend or invest these funds for sustainable development and not just in the recurrent budget. Now, this is important because we need to find a basic method of investment that allows development at all levels, at federal level up to the subsidiary level in the local government. The geological features of a mineral deposits have to be in such a way that they can be mined profitably. The use of technologies that are efficient and environmentally friendly means that the company will spend less on clean-up operations. Prices of metals are cyclical and can determine profitability or losses. Transparency in the revenue reporting system can improve profitability as it discourages corruption. Having a coherent legal and regulatory framework is also conducive to a healthy environment for doing business. Okay, now we can look at the fiscal models that are used in the mining industry. The IMF is improving on this method, has developed fiscal analysis resource for industries, FARI. This FARI tool, fiscal analysis of resource industries, helps to see how much money a company has made and also the government has made, and see how they can effectively tax that particular company or sector. The main indicators of interest to governments from the tool are the average effective tax rate and the marginal effective tax rate, and the progressivity of the fiscal regimes, a measure of the extent to which the effective tax rate becomes higher as the profitability of the project becomes higher. So this average effective tax rate taxes the average income, and the marginal effective tax rate, it taxes when the mining companies make very little money. Fiscal models should include the cost of environmental and social impact management. More jurisdictions have started using environmental financial assurance in the mining sector, commonly referred to as environmental bonds. Okay, so these fiscal models are used by government to see how best they can tax these mines. Additionally, as we discussed in the previous modules, there's Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, which is supposed to help governments to see where the money is going from the mining industry, and also citizens to see where the money is going. To meet the standard, the country needs to publish revenues received by all government agencies from the extractive sector and extractive companies. Then they can be a member of ETI. A key element in the ETI is that both the global and country levels is overseen by a multi-stakeholder board, which ensures independence of its activities. All right. To achieve transparency in the extractive sector have been discussed before. We talked about the Kimberley process, which focuses on clean diamonds. Okay, and then we talked on Publish What You Pay, which is a global coalition of 800 civil society organizations, which requires mining companies to publish whatever they pay. And then Resource Contracts is a publicly available database that allows mining companies, oil and gas companies, to actually put there all the contracts they give to anyone, and anyone can see these ones. The IMF has released the draft Natural Resource Fiscal Transparency Code in 2016, which addresses the issue of the clarity of the roles, responsibilities on public processes, public availability of information, and assurances of integrity. Okay. Other initiatives put in place to improve governance of fiscal revenues. This is the US Dodd-Frank Act. This US Dodd-Frank Act, requires that the provisions of companies in the extractive industry that are publicly listed in the United States to disclose all material payments made to the US and foreign governments. The new EU Accounting and Transparency Directives also were adopted in 2018, which require companies in the logging and extractive industries which are publicly listed in the European Union or large unlisted companies domiciled in the EU to disclose payments. These are methods that are trying to ensure that corruption is removed from the extractive sector. Government equity participation is not tax, but this represents payment from a mining company to the government in kind of a service. Resource-rich developing countries can gain equity participation in a mining project or company through several means. One, they can pay up some money and become like any other investor. Two, by borrowing the amount from the private investor and later repaying it from royalties and taxes payable to the government. Three, by giving up some future taxes. And four, by making in-kind contributions such as infrastructure provision. By receiving free equity share, that means the company gives the government an equity share. This is the case in Namibia. In Namibia, the government gets a 10% equity share. A progressive fiscal regime is one which applies higher tax rates when the mines make higher profits and lower tax rates when the profit is low. Government can also set up natural resource funds for stabilization and savings of fiscal revenues from their resource sectors. This will help them during the periods of low prices. Revenues from resource extraction should be invested in building other forms of wealth or capital rather than all consumed all the time. This is an investment for the future, and it helps to ensure that there is development remaining in the country. Economic growth through linkages with mining and economic growth. This we discussed in the previous lecture, that production linkages of the mining sector with other sectors can be more important to economic diversification and development than the actual fiscal revenues. Moreover, this contribution can be greater in monetary terms because if mining companies can give contracts to local companies, it means that that money remains in the hands of local companies, and that money will be used by the local company and not necessarily the government. The estimates are that 40 to 80% of these companies' revenues is spent on procurement of goods and services. So if we can channel this money to local companies, then we can have development, which we call side linkages. Indirect revenues from mining is estimated that 50 to 65% of mining companies spend on employment. That means the employees, they take almost 2/3 of the company's revenue, infrastructure and procurement, while only 15% to 20% is on taxes. Okay, which means that even a relatively small shift of a mining company's expenditures from overseas to domestic suppliers in the host country can be larger in monetary terms than a large increase in tax payments. Therefore, governments are expected to actually increase their linkages rather than increase taxes. Another indirect revenue flows comes from mining in the provision of employment to local communities. Most of the jobs that are unskilled can be given to local communities. This will increase the money flowing to the local community. When a new mine sets up, the community benefits from new infrastructure, new clinics, and hospitals. The community also benefits by having access to services such as electricity, which they did not have. Okay, and also that helps to bring development in that local area where the mine is established. Mineral wealth should be managed successfully. If it's managed effectively, the mineral sector has the potential to play an important role in national and local economic development. Countries like Botswana, Chile, Australia, and Canada, and the US have benefited positively from the exploiting of mineral resources and ensuring that there is investment in the local communities as well. Most African countries seem to have actually become poorer and heavily indebted despite mining minerals. This appears more to be a function of governance and forward planning, lack of forward planning, than just having the minerals in the country. Now we can see now that having a mineral deposit does not always translate in being a rich nation. Good examples are DRC, for example, the richest country on the continent, and yet has got a very poor record on the mining industry. One of the most immediate ways is through additional employment, both direct and indirect. Mining activity also generates new infrastructure, as we've discussed, railway lines, electricity, roads, schools, hospitals, that although provided for minerals industry, and this workforce can also benefit the rest of the population. At the local level, it should contribute to the development of skills and local businesses. Meanwhile, the economy as a whole can be stimulated as minerals companies forge multiple outward linkages. We cannot overemphasize this aspect, the linkages, backwards to the industry that supply goods and services, and forwards to the industries that process mineral outputs. Okay? So linkages is a key area in fiscal planning framework. What are the challenges that countries that mine minerals in Africa are facing? Any country that wishes to translate mineral wealth in the ground into human development for its people will face these challenges. And these challenges include a demonstration that minerals potential is able to attract exploration and also development, into the country so that people can invest. The other one is establishing an attractive investment climate and progressive mineral policies. Developing domestic mineral sector infrastructure, creating sustaining mineral wealth while protecting environmental quality and other social and cultural values. So environmental quality is very important because we have a very big problem as the environment would have been polluted. Sharing surpluses or economic rents from mineral production. Most of the countries, they tax the mining companies and all the money goes to the central government. The money does not come to local communities. Converting non-renewable resources. So we need to mine and convert that money into non-renewable resources, mineral wealth into renewable resources by investing in physical and human capital, training, and also doing in a way that helps to protect the interests of the future generations. Maintaining a stable economic environment while coping with the exchange rate and dealing with potential impact of mining sector on crucial issues of governance, in particular corruption, regional tensions, and over how revenue is shared, human rights, and conflict. If we reduce those, we are likely to develop faster. External and internal factors on revenues in the mining sector come in various ways. External factors are mainly due to the volatility of metal prices. This volatility, there's nothing we can do about it. It can happen due to several factors. For example, oversupply, substitutes or lower production costs. We talked about this in our previous lectures. And then internal factors are due to the cases where the mining sector is so dominant that it crowds out other sectors. A good example is the Netherlands. A shale gas company crowded out all the small companies. It became so dominant that there was no space for other companies to act. So we need to balance these things. We should never make the mining industry the only industry. One of the most contentious issues is how to share mineral revenues between central government and local government and the communities in the mining area. Governments will have to consider local preferences. Would the people prefer direct payments for land use, say, or would they be happier with higher government expenditure on services to build them schools and hospitals and roads? Or would they want to have money? That's a very good question that needs to be asked. A key method is more deliberate sharing of fiscal revenues among different levels of government and stakeholders. A very good example is Peru. In Peru, the mining law, which is the Canon Minero, provides that a fixed percentage of the revenues collected from mining by the central government will be paid to the regional authorities. Because of this, it means that the regional authorities will always have money coming from the mining industries. But because of fiscal problems, the central government normally has problems to donate this money to the local government. In Indonesia, however, the central government, which under the previous regime guarded the revenues closely at the center, is currently embarking on a radical program of decentralization that will pass many powers to the regions. That is the best way to develop the regional centers. You get the money from the mining companies and it's distributed in percentage-wise to the regional governments. In reality, few countries have provisions for revenue distribution beyond the national level, and this is not a good thing. The inability to distribute mining revenues effectively may also be a reflection of more general weaknesses in governance, such as corruption, poor accountability, lack of transparency, and lack of democratic decision-making. Setting aside funds from a particular source of taxation and earmarking them for specific purpose is called hypothecation, a technique that runs counter to the IMF policy on fiscal management and budgeting. Hypothecation is quite good in a way, in the fact that you have fixed amount of money going to certain development, although the IMF is against that. So countries with loans with the IMF will not be allowed to do that. Okay, and they have an amount considered as corporate tax already paid. Most of the projects involve health, education activities, along with other services such as water supplies, roads, and policing. When identifying projects, companies have to consult with all levels of government as well as local communities. Any such scheme should probably be transitional and involve as rapid a devolution as possible to local governance institutions. So the models of sharing wealth are different across different countries, but the best models are those that have fixed percentages for the central government and for the local governments. The money which comes to the local government has got much more effect on development than the money that remains in the central government. All right, thank you very much. This is the end of this lecture.